Okay, fine. There is no board today. I'm in a new place. So tell me what you understood. I gave you material on 3 people. Who are those 3? Phule, Narayan Guru. You can switch on the videos. There is no bandwidth problem. Phule, Narayan Guru, and Periyar. Tell me whom you liked. What is the approach? They have particular approach to religion, approach to caste, and also that religion and caste are intermixed. Okay. So, what did you like about them?
So not specific to a given idea, but I like the way they approach independently.
Okay. You like the way that there can be different approaches possible.
Right.
Okay. For example, what are those? I mean, can you explain what are
So
those 3 approaches?
first is Fule's approach.
Hmm?
Uh, so he was against the Brahmins first of all, and he wanted to establish a religion, but he couldn't.
Can you say he wanted to establish a religion?
I mean, not religion, but
He wanted
where
to reform the religion.
yeah, reform the religion.
Reform the religion. Reform in which sense he wanted?
So that Brahmins castes are removed from the script. I mean, from the religion itself.
Yes, Brahmanism and caste. Brahmanism and caste. Yes. Brahmanism he didn't want, caste he didn't want. Uh, okay. But then why should he reject Hindu gods?
Because they were mainly scripture based, and scriptures were based on Brahmanism.
Wow, that's true. Scriptures, gods, all are interlinked process. Okay, scriptures, gods. These gods are rejected by Ambedkar also. So Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva rejected, Brahmins rejected, and there are so many ceremonies in which Brahmins need to perform, and he didn't want those ceremonies. Casteism he didn't want.
Also, he was a
Tell me, Sunil, what is Hinduism minus casteism?
if we go by that definition, then Hinduism would stand itself. That's my opinion.
Hinduism won't
Stand itself. There won't be a religion called Hinduism if that is not the
if
case.
caste is removed.
Yeah, because that is the whole essence of it.
So no Hinduism without caste.
I mean, that's my take.
Fine. Sure, sure. There are different ways of looking at it. Vishal, what do you say? He's saying there cannot be any Hinduism minus caste.
Sorry, sir, I couldn't hear you.
He's saying, I mean, what is Hinduism minus caste? Minus Brahminism, minus caste. Is there
Well,
Hinduism?
it
Is
would
there,
depend on the person actually. If you take the philosophy of Hinduism,
I am asking you. So how does it depend if Vishal is taken into consideration?
I never thought of it. I do not. I basically I don't believe in gods or anything.
That is another point. Can Hinduism survive after gods being taken away?
Hinduism can survive, sir.
I am asking you as a Hindu, you are not a Muslim. Did you convert your religion?
Well, I'm an Indian basically.
Oh, you belong to
New
Indian
identity.
religion. You belong to Indian religion. Okay. So your constitution is the scripture.
So Hinduism can survive without gods, but the caste or the literal sense in which Hinduism we take cannot survive, like the Brahmins or the priests.
Okay.
Hinduism as a philosophy can survive without
But
gods.
what is Hinduism as a philosophy?
Say many Vedas or tell that dharma is the divine. You need to work without any uh, ill motives or so.
Something like Gita.
Yeah, something like Gita.
Hmm.
So philosophically, it can survive. Anyway, those philosophies are imbibed in us from the childhood.
Hmm.
Even if I don't believe in Hinduism, I have those values, I can say. So for me, Hinduism
Now,
is
what
not
did you say?
God actually.
Even if you don't believe in?
Even if I don't believe in Hinduism, those values are in me because of the society. So uh, even even if Hinduism goes, those values will be with us.
Okay. So you mean to say that these values are important, dharma.
Mostly.
How about working without expecting fruits?
That's true, sir. Like if we see logically, when we expect something, we get depressed after working. Like we haven't got that thing, even if we haven't done this much also.
Hmm. Especially for this exam, that attitude is very important. Work, work without expectations. So work without expectations. So you mean to say Hinduism is not simply caste but philosophy, morality. Okay.
In a kind, yes, it's a multi-dimensional, but uh,
Hinduism involves philosophy, morality is one dimension.
caste hierarchy is
Caste
one
is one
dimension.
dimension. Brahmanism and caste are interlinked, one dimension. So there is moral dimension, there is ritual dimension, caste dimension, philosophy,
Identity.
identity. Hinduism as an identity. Okay. So, like the crisis that Fule faced, that he doesn't know much about what to do with the religion, but he is definitely against Brahmanism and caste. So, how do you think he should have gone about it?
Uh, I think he has gone in the right way. Well,
Found a society. What should he tell the members of the society? For example, can one call oneself Hindu after rejecting Brahmins, after rejecting caste, and after rejecting Hindu gods and so many scriptures?
he can actually. Why not, sir?
Hmm.
He can, but I guess if we think in a societal way, society won't agree with him. They will label him as anti-Hindu or non-Hindu.
Okay, then, but you mean to say those people who are following it can consider themselves Hindus, but others won't accept?
Yes.
You know, under such circumstances, so if such people become more popular, you call them sects. They become sects. And sects one day they become religions. So if others say you are not following us, you are different, and it is about religion, then it will be called cult, most likely cult. Section is a division of the religion. Cult is something new. It can start as a cult, it can start as a sect, but it can become a new religion. So what can start as a cult can become a religion. Protestantism, Catholicism are sects. Shia, Sunni are sects. Sikhism at one time was a cult. It became a religion. Even Islam at one time was a cult. It became a religion. Cult is something new, very little, small. When it becomes big enough, then it may become a religion. Okay.
Sir, what is the difference between sect and cult?
Difference between
Sect and cult.
sect is many aspects of the religion are accepted and some deviation. Shia, Sunni, they accept Prophet Muhammad, they accept Allah, they accept Quran, but they disagree on who would be the successor to the Prophet. That is a sect. In the Christianity, they accept the Bible, God, Holy Spirit, Jesus, but they disagree on the role of the Pope. Pope was criticized by Protestants, accepted by Catholics. So, role of Pope. So it can be about succession, like in Islam, or it can be about who can be the intermediary. Okay. But regarding that succession, also different interpretations. What is the role of an intermediary? That was debated in Islam also. So after main things accepted, some changes. That is a sect. After main thing accepted, most important thing accepted. But something new, but religion is cult. Something new which an economic organization is a company. It can't be a cult. Something new which wants to contest in elections is a political party. Okay. Something to do with supernatural, moral code, philosophy, that is new, then it can be a cult.
Sir, I don't know, I'm asking a relevant question, but this, you have heard about Sadhguru, right, Sadhguru? So all of his, I think there is a cult formation. It will be a cult or sect, sir, if it happens.
It-
It's sect, I think. Or,
Yeah, as of now, cult is used in variety of ways. People may say it is a cult. It's something as branching off. It can be called a cult. It can be called a cult. Some elements included. Anything new comes as a cult. But it may not become any major force. If this man is alive, so there will be some followers, but it may never emerge as a cult or a religion. Not like that. I don't think Sadhguru, I don't think he has that stature in the first place. So he's a good entertainer, and of course, he has some valuable experience. But beyond that, I don't think there is anything really new, provocative, that others would say, no, you are saying something new and we don't agree with you. What is there in Sadhgurus like that? Isn't it? It is not a new interpretation. It's just like explaining the tradition to a modern audience, often justifying it and giving a spiritual depth to tradition. Where is something new and original, unique? No. If there is anything new about him, I would say it is the propensity to gossip. Religious people don't do that much of gossiping like Sadhguru does. Sadhguru enjoys gossiping. I mean, that may be good aspect also because he's educating many people. That is good. Okay. But I don't think it will ever be a cult or anything like that. Okay. He's just a guru. Just a guru, that's all, nothing more. Just a guru. Nothing more. Some people can be gurus, some people can be gods. Shirdi Sai Baba has become a god. Okay. But they need not lead to cults and sects. Some people can be gods without producing cults and sects. Okay. So Sadhguru will come as a guru or a godman. That's all. I don't think he can found a cult or anything like that. Okay. Cult is something new where, as defined, others should think, no, you are doing something different. We don't agree with you. It can't be. You are misinterpreting. Like that. Then that is cult. Sufism, you can say it is a cult. But that is definitely within Islam. Okay. Maybe, I think many times it may be difficult to say whether it is a cult or a sect. But if it is something completely new, then it is a cult. Sect is within. Sometimes it can be both cult and a sect. If you are saying something new, definitely it has to be a cult. Okay. So what did Phule want? He didn't want Brahmanism, he didn't want caste system. He wanted education of women, Western education. Okay. Being critical of Indian society. But it was difficult for him to give an alternative. Alternative to religion is not easy. Okay. Prophet Muhammad gave an alternative, founded a new religion. Guru Nanak started as a cult and became a religious founder. Buddha gave a religion, but started as a cult. So at one time it may look like a sect, but later it may become even a religion with clear differences, disagreements. So maybe we can't always say something has ended and something new has come. You know, in the case of Sikhism, for many years within a family, am I audible clearly?
Yes, sir.
Maybe I'd increase the sound. Okay. In many families, one son would be a Sikh and another son would be a Hindu. Being a Sikh means simply following certain things. I mean, clear type religion did not emerge. Much later, religious divisions and Hindu-Sikh conflict emerged. Okay. For example, within a family, within a Hindu South Indian family, you may find some people Satya Sai Baba devotees, isn't it? But they won't be marked, and nobody will say we will not give our daughters to Satya Sai Baba devotees. Not like that. So we'll think in our family, some people are Satya Sai Baba devotees, and these devotees will meet on one particular day, or they visit Puttaparthi and celebrate certain common things. That's all. It's not like a distinct religion, identity, we are different, and fighting it out. And if all those things happen, then you say it is a religion is wrong.
Sir, in North, sir, not just Sai Baba, but Buddha has also been included in the larger Hinduism.
That's true. That is Hinduism's way of looking at Buddha. Okay. Buddhism was not treated as a separate religion. That's also true. But according to Hindu tradition, Buddha is one of the avatars.
Even in constitution also we treat Buddhists and Sikhs on
Yes,
par like
Buddha,
Hindus.
Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, and Hinduism. They're all Indian origin religions. The constitution did not say Buddha was an avatara. Simply Indian born religions are treated on par. They will have reservation facilities. But that came much later. In the beginning, it was not there. Later, reservations were extended even to other religions. Only Christians and Muslims are isolated. So basically, what is Hinduism minus caste is an issue. Minus caste means minus Brahmanism. Minus Brahmanism means minus certain scriptures and rituals and even some festivals. Okay. What is an advantage if one converts to another religion? There won't be any confusion, because all the aspects of that new religion will be yours. Festivals, ceremonies, scriptures, gods. You don't have to innovate anything. Conversion is an easy system. Okay. Reforming a religion, if there are serious differences, are difficult. And cults and sects are not easy. So, conversion is easy. Conversion. Okay. But people who may have some serious ideas on spirituality or how religion should be, they may not want to convert. They want to reform. They may have a new ideology which they want to advocate. Okay. So they will have different issues. Okay. So we'll come to Phule and economy, but let us look at religion aspect, religion and caste. So tell me, who took a completely opposite view of Phule? Completely different.
Gandhiji.
Gandhiji, that's true, but within this, among these three people, Phule,
Narayan Guru.
Narayan Guru and Periyar.
Narayan Guru.
Narayan Guru.
Narayan. What is his approach to religion?
He wanted Dalits to be a part of Hinduism, or allow them to follow the rituals and everything of Hinduism.
That is true. He wanted to follow the rituals of Hinduism. But he's also anti-Brahminic.
Sir, he wanted like this systematic
Just
reforms.
complete.
In terms of
how could one be anti-Brahmin and at the same time pro-Hindu and pro-Dalit.
In terms of access to Hinduism generically, access to Hindu temples, Hindu scriptures, worshipping. So they are like a gatekeepers. So you don't want that gatekeepers as Brahmins.
That's true. That's true. That's Fule's approach. But how did Narayan Guru approach this problem? Narayan Guru's idea of Brahmins. What is Narayan Guru's approach to Brahmins and Fule's approach to Brahmins? Do they both oppose, yes or no?
Yes.
They both oppose. But what is the difference? Is my
So
question
Fule,
clear? Narayan Guru is opposed to Brahminism. Fule also is opposed to Brahminism. Okay. What would be Brahmin's approach to both of them? Brahmin's approach to Narayan Guru, Brahmin's approach to Fule.
they were more accommodative to Narayan Guru.
They are more accommodative.
Mm.
Why? Why should they be accommodative of somebody who is so critical? Or you say he is not so critical?
So just a question, Fule was challenging Hinduism itself.
It was not clear whether Fule was challenging Hinduism. Fule
Because
was
as
challenging Brahminism, challenging caste system, rejecting Trinity. So the question is, what is it that he was accepting in Hinduism?
because also the people who follow Fule, because means as far as I know, they have they worship different god, Bali god. Means it's so
That's true.
it's a Hindu god only. Means as far as we know, but
No.
Bali.
Hindu.
Bali Raja they say, means I
That's
don't know the story,
That's
but they have a different
That is
god.
true. Just 1 second, please. This is very important. Another thing about Hinduism is that just because you create a new god, does it mean you won't be a Hindu? Can I tell you one thing about Hinduism? It is very difficult to tell that I am not a Hindu. Because what is it that you have to do to say you are not a Hindu or to prove that you are not a Hindu is not at all clear. Because you can reject Hindu gods and still Hinduism will own you up. You are condemned. You are born as a Hindu. You are condemned to live as a Hindu. Unless, of course, if you are converted, that is different. Even after conversion, people don't really get rid of Hinduism. Jagan Mohan Reddy converted, but isn't he seen as a Reddy and not a Hindu? Very much. So Hinduism is a curse. Once you are born, you can't wipe it off. So that raises the question, suppose you make Wali as a god, does it mean you are not a Hindu? Because in Hinduism, you are free to create your own gods. This is one of the luxuries of Hinduism. Hinduism has an oppressive system of caste system, there is no doubt. But it offers many luxuries in terms of gods. You can create gods and then under certain circumstances, you yourself can become a god. No religion offers this greatest luxury for a man to become God. Not a saint, but God himself. And some people had made an effective use of this provision in Hinduism. They simply became gods. In no other religion, you can be a god. You can be a good man, you can be a saint. But becoming a god is the luxury of a Hindu. Highest luxury that Hindu is given. And tell me, can you tell me who are certain people who became God successfully? This is the highest kind of mobility one can think of.
Sai Baba.
Huh?
Sai
Which
Baba.
Sai Baba? Which Sai Baba?
Shirdi Sai Baba.
Exactly. Shri Sai Baba is a god. And then, of these three people, did anybody become God? Worshipped in a temple?
Narayan Guru statues were erected.
Exactly. Narayana Guru is a god. Just that Shri Sai Baba is much more popular than Narayana Guru, but Narayana Guru is God. This is one of the greatest thing or most unusual or unique thing to Hinduism, that human beings can become gods, which is not there in any religion. So if you are ever ashamed of Hinduism, if you are a Hindu and be ashamed of this one provision that you should think of, because no other provision, no religion gave you this greatest luxury and highest mobility. Highest mobility of becoming a god. They took so much time, Pope and others took so much time to declare Mother Teresa as a saint. So many deliberations just to declare her as a saint. Whereas Hindus casually make people gods.
But with advent of technology, this luxury is a bit hard to
No,
get.
no. Why do you think so? Shri Sai Baba is born recently. You mean to say internet will not enable? I don't think so. How?
Sir, for somebody to become God, probably I think there are two ways. One being showing some miracles, or the other maybe mass followers. But with
Narayana Guru did not show any miracles.
yeah, so he must have had a huge following, sir.
That's true. But why would people follow is an issue. You can't say because he must be God. No. Why would people follow? Follow to make him a God. You can follow to make him a leader. If Jagan declares that I want to be God, will people accept? No. So under what circumstances people accept that person to be God? It's not an easy thing.
So I think you just need a very interesting
Just
story.
take the
Like that you
question
are
first. Just take time. You cannot say you have mass following. Following to be a God is a completely different thing. That's not politicians following. It's not businessman's following. So you have to see there is something in Hinduism that makes a man a god. And you also see, if you ask Sai Baba devotees, Shri Sai Baba devotees, they don't make any difference between Shri Sai Baba and somebody like Lord Venkateshwara. We may think Lord Venkateshwara is a real god because nobody saw him. And Shri Sai Baba cannot be a real god because so many people saw him. We have photos and there are so many stories. Okay. But then there is no difference. People worship, pray, and they expect certain wishes fulfilled. So they won't ask, world was created long ago and Baba came recently, so you can't think that this Baba created the world. No, it's not like that. Baba is God. And God created the world. Yes, that is also true. God created man. That is true. Baba is God. That's also true. So when Hindus, Sai Baba devotees pray, they don't pray him as a saint or thing like that. They don't make any distinction between Venkateshwara and Shirdi Sai Baba or Shiva and Shirdi Sai Baba. They don't. Which means a man, when he becomes God, he's treated as God. His low origins are forgotten. So nobody will say that you became God only through man, so you are inferior. No. Shiva is not superior to Shirdi Sai Baba. Both are equal. So no religion allows this. Why is it so? I mean, okay, is this point clear? So if you talk to Sai Baba devotees, they don't make any difference whatsoever between Venkateshwara and Sai Baba. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
It is not that they think that this man has some miracles, but less than God. Not at all like that. Not like that. He is God.
So we also discussed another concept regarding small g and big G gods. So where does he
Yes.
fall into that?
Small g, capital G, and the small g is an aspect of capital G. So small g, capital G, small God and capital God are our notions. Small God is seen as an expression of capital God, like that. Again, it is not in a hierarchical sense. It is not in a hierarchical sense. Small God is bossed over by a big God. It's not like that in Hinduism. It is simply an aspect, a form. A form. It is not that Shirdi Sai Baba is inferior to Brahma. Sai Baba is a form of Brahma, like that. It's not hierarchical relationship. That is why it is one God. It is not that multiple gods are being supervised by one God, not like that. So this is an extraordinary rare thing about Hinduism. No difference is maintained. If this point is clear, then I will go further on this. Is this clear? Is this acceptable? That there is no difference maintained?
Sir, there is no difference, but the acceptance for new gods comes from the disadvantaged sections only. Only they, because he offers he offers a solution to their problems.
By Shirdi
See,
Sai Baba is being followed by very rich people, not disadvantaged sections.
it starts off with that. He
How?
might be offering alternate
It
perspectives.
need not be. Why should it be like that? Shirdi Sai Baba did not start with.
Whatever I have heard, he was pro poor, pro women kind of.
How to be pro poor only? How can God be pro rich? That's not that is not like that. Because God
So the support might have come from the poor and women.
no, it may
Just
have,
like,
but he is treated as a God by the rich also.
I mean, they emerge as gods when they offer alternate perspective to the prevailing opinion, might be. Just like Buddha, I don't know Sai Baba offered any alternative thinking, but Buddha and Mahavira, they were offering. He became God within Hinduism, but I don't know, sir, I don't know what my question is also, but some
Did Buddhism become popular because of the conversion from the lower caste?
no patronage by kings.
Why should kings patronize somebody?
Maybe they were also fed up with Brahminism. They were also fed up with domination of Brahmins. Could be, I don't know, sir.
Thank you. See, there is one very important philosophy in Hinduism that is related to moksha. These are central to Hinduism. I would say, like caste is an aspect of Hinduism, moksha is an equally important aspect of Hinduism. I would say Hinduism is based on two, one caste and another moksha. Central thing about moksha is that man has a self, and if self is gone, he is God. If self is dissolved, he is God. So whoever has his self dissolved becomes God. It is not because of representation to the lower caste, lower classes. No.
The followers, I'm telling, sir. Maybe till then the process they were not
Who
accommodated.
became gods became through spiritual force. Popularity may be one thing, but spirituality. People don't become gods. People become activists otherwise, fighters, but they don't become gods. So if Narayana Guru's statue is erected and temple is constructed, people were not offended because that is the nature. Even now you see many small, why in my village, we know that man. I saw him when I was young enough. He used to come. Now he is worshipped as a god and festival is being, was Reddy, Koti Reddy, his name. And festivals are celebrated, festivals are organized. And then in other districts also, some such phenomena. I mean, it can be an upper caste person seen as some kind of a transformed person. So basically, Hindus have an attitude that if some transformation takes place within a person, then he can be taken as a god. Which means the distance between man and God is not there in Hinduism. The distance is something that can be crossed. It is not unbridgeable and uncrossable. This is a central Hindu belief. So they attribute very high properties to God, but they think man can become God under certain circumstances, which is within the reach of every man, but rarely realized. That is what is moksha is. So the goal of every Hindu is to attain moksha in the end, to become one with God, not remain as a man or a woman. And when some people make it, they are treated as gods. It is not that the lower castes are making with a rebellious spirit, not like that.
The history books write that.
Because history books are analyzing this Marxism and Enlightenment related European developments. They don't have an idea of philosophy. It's all Marxist philosophy, Marxism.
So does it have any influence of the Vedanta's Aham Brahmasmi kind of?
This is Vedanta. This is Vedanta. Okay, when man's individuality is gone, one merges with God. Advaita means no division. No division between individual soul and cosmic soul. People use small s and capital S, like small g, capital G. Individuals have small s, small souls. Okay. And when individuality is seen as an illusion, then individual soul merges with capital soul, supreme soul, also called Brahman. So these two are twin concepts, Atman and Brahman. Atman and Brahman. When Atman merges with Brahman, then one becomes God. Advaita means no division. Atman is an aspect of Brahman, but people think they are individualistic, which is an illusion. Whether these are right or wrong is one issue, but what is important for our social science purpose is that the idea that the man can become God is a very, very natural belief to a Hindu. We are examining the beliefs rather than the truth of those beliefs. Truth of those beliefs is a different issue. Sociology doesn't examine that. Okay, but do people believe? Yes. So that is the reason why in Hinduism, people can easily become gods. In fact, there are so many who have become. It's just that some have become popular gods and some haven't. There are so many local gods. So many local gods. People becoming gods few years after death or gods during life. During life. But normally, people should be saintly enough to become gods. So Hindus have an idea that this man is selfless, simple, okay, kind. But that is not enough. Something they assume can be miracles or whatever. Okay. But the idea that man can become God is very natural. Is very natural. So man can become God and man can invent new gods. And a villain can be made a god. For example, Wali is a villain in Hindu story. That is the reason why certain activists made Wali as a hero. I mean, Phule made Wali as a hero. Because Wali is the one who was deceived by a Brahmin, Vamana. Wali wrote so many things, gave so many things to Vamana, and he wanted third feet and nothing to give, and so he put his third feet on Bali and Bali crushed. So Brahmin versus king story. Okay. So in Hinduism, lot of innovation is there. Lot of innovation. Creation of multiple gods. Diversity. Villains becoming gods. Villains of one becoming gods of another. Caste-wise diversity. Caste-wise stories. And gods as philosophers becoming gods, as a part of philosophy, people becoming gods. Okay. So what Narayana Guru did is that he is seen as a saint, the one who realized the truth. And when people see one as realized the truth, everybody accepts it. That includes Brahmins. So these are not God creation as an opposition to religion. This is a creation of God as part of religion. So see one lower caste person, Narayana Guru, taking a rock and then saying, this is Shiva. And when Brahmins asked, how dare you say it is Shiva? Then he said, this man, this is a lower caste Shiva, and your what was Shiva in your temple is a Brahmin Shiva. How could one say it? Because he was such a saint. If he was a social scientist and said like that, I don't think it would be accepted. It would lead to riot. This is one of the greatest things about Hindus. People recognize some inner beauty, some inner worth, and find that they are gods. Okay. And also remember, when temple is being constructed and being worshipped, Hindus don't assume this man is arrogant. Not like that. He himself will think he is also praying God. For example, people sit around Ravana Maharshi and people pray Ravana Maharshi. Ravana Maharshi also may join. Ravana Maharshi won't think all of them are praying for me. Not like that. He will not have that individual consciousness. They are doing this to me. He will think, okay, all of us are God's aspects. I don't think Shirdi Sai Baba felt, see, look, I became so great. These people are like that. Shirdi Sai Baba also is a realized person. Okay, capable of miracles, but that is not an important thing. Some people are in a position to do some miracles, and some are not, and sometimes hugely exaggerated. All kinds of things are there. That is a different story. But it is not true that one should have miracles to become a god. It is not all like that. One need not perform miracles. One need not have power. In fact, through power, you can't be a god. Power is ruled out. Akbar had so much of power, but he could not establish a religion. And around the same time, Nanak became a founder. Nanak around that. And then there are so many Sufi saints who are worshipped now, but nobody worships Akbar. He's only historical figure. So religious founders have to be treated and seen as kind and not treated as seen. They are. So they should have depth. There is no doubt about it. Some level of acceptance, spiritual depth. Okay. Inner beauty. If they are seen as some kind of mean people, they won't. So Hindus who became gods, they have certain extraordinary qualities. Because only then others will assume that these people are no longer selfish. No longer selfish. Becoming God is not the same thing as becoming a guru. Guru is an intermediary. Guru guides people. So there are so many gurus. For example, can Sadguru ever be a God? Absolutely hopeless case. One who talks so much can never be a God in the first place.
So, sir,
Okay.
what if they
He
construct
can only be an
temple?
interpreter. Huh?
What if they construct a temple for him, or
No, it won't pick up. God has to be seen somewhat mysterious to generate worship. Not talk so much with so many errors. Shri Sai Baba generates that. In fact, he is so. Okay. So it is not that anybody can become a god. Sadhguru is more like a scholar plus some mystical religious experience. Surely not only a scholar, he has religious experience. Okay, he's doing a good thing. There is no doubt about it. I am not criticizing him on the whole, but he is bringing that religious consciousness to the people. That is important. He's bringing that religious consciousness. People are thinking about religion. That is great. That is very badly needed. Okay. So he's doing his work. That's good. But he can never be a saint, he can never be a god. He will be a guru and he will be an interesting figure. And maybe after he's gone, he will be of less interest. But there is nothing original about him, nothing original, provocative, not like that. Okay. I would say he's more like spiritual version of Vivekananda. Spiritual version. I'm calling him more spiritual than Vivekananda. Making people proud of their past. Bringing again. Religion needs rejuvenation, refreshing. Sadhguru is doing that. Refreshing, new life, new look. That's what he is doing. Far better than Vivekananda. Okay. But Vivekananda is not treated as a god. He's a scholar, monk, not more than that. So, religious experience. So, man with religious experience is some kind of religious experience is treated as God in Hinduism. So, what the shocking thing about Narayan Guru is that Narayan Guru in his own lifetime became like a God. And in the notes I gave, 3 top people, Gandhi, Tagore, and Ramana Maharshi, all have certified him in one way or the other. Definitely, they are not easy people to satisfy. Tagore is an extremely sensitive and rationalist, and Ramana Maharshi. All of them found this man is something substantial. Okay. So essentially, we also know the nature of truth, nature of highest truth in Hinduism. It is something to do with self, self-transformation, about individuality. Okay. So whoever knows the limitations of, in fact, not many are aware. Sadhguru has depth. He knows certain things which no other popular person knows. For example, Ravi Shankar, a part of living. There are many, but not only they don't have experience, but Sadhguru knows clearly that mind is not thing. Mind is like a body. Mind is not self, like that. So Sadhguru has certain insights. Those insights are very, very unusual, but those insights are common to Hinduism. Common to Hinduism. So he has that grounding and an experiential understanding, not simply reading and talking about it. Some kind of an experiential understanding. So serious people recognize that there is some worth, and atheists are confused that how can this fellow be so rational and have depth. And reasonable number of people are impressed and find him man of substance. So how many people can handle debates and discussions from a variety of quarters, in all sorts of ways, from college students to professors and religious figures? Okay, one man answering so many questions in so many areas. In whatever area you touch, there is some depth, some insight. Isn't it shocking? Okay. Definitely, it is not because of reading. No. So that's what confuses the knowledgeable people. He didn't seem to have read, and whatever he was saying about in the books, that seems to be wrong. But whatever he is saying, which is not there in the books, that seems to be right. So what is he up to? is the question. In fact, that is how knowledgeable people approach the spiritual person. They judge the spiritual person thinking, how is he able to say these things? He hasn't read them, or what he's saying is not there in the books. How could he say these things? So if he was saying something, then there must be something in him, which I don't have. So that's how people like Narayana Guru or Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, they shocked intellectuals. They shocked. Vivekananda was an intellectual, rationalist. So this is something unique to Hinduism. So why I included Narayana Guru is that Narayana Guru's approach is so completely different. It is anti-conversion. Okay. And reform with spiritual basis. Reform with a spiritual basis. And to him, Hinduism is casteism, not at all casteism. Hinduism is Advaita. The highest thing of Hinduism is Advaita, not casteism. Hinduism is moksha. Hinduism is not Brahmanism. So Phule needs to think so much to say this is Brahmanism, gods are different, so much of analysis. But Narayana Guru just takes one rock and then says he is Shiva. How can you say? Because I myself know it. That's all, as simple, and people believe it. So Narayana Guru represents completely different approach to caste and religion. All others are scholars. Narayana Guru is different. Okay. Next, Periyar. What is Periyar's approach? Extremely simple approach. Atheism, rationalism. Okay. So definitely more people will be connected to Periyar. But then, as I said, it is not really an argument about the existence of God and things like that. He was basically critical of the kind of God which people are worshipping. How can a God be so discriminatory? How can a God be so cruel? So he is against Brahmanism, against that notion of God. He also wanted different rituals. He created what was called self-respect marriage. Self-respect. How will you get self-respect when you don't worship Brahmins, when you don't regard them as intermediaries between God and man? So Periyar's approach is a rational approach. Okay. And all three did not, they may have thought of, but they did not convert. Of course, Narayana Guru won't need to convert. Periyar thought of conversion, but he didn't. Okay. Phule didn't think of it. Okay. So, but one additional angle to Periyar is he equated casteism also with racial origins. Upper caste Aryans, lower caste Dravidians. So he brought racial origins to caste. And then he gave geographical angle also. North India Aryans, South India Dravidians. And then he did not want Brahminical domination, which also meant Aryan domination, which also meant North Indian domination, which meant Hindi imposition. So Periyar's agenda became more political and more social. And it finally led to a kind of secessionist movement. He wanted South India to separate. He wanted Dravida Nadu, but there were no takers to Dravida Nadu. All that finally became Tamil Nadu. That's all. Okay. And in Tamil Nadu, he created a lot of impact. So that is why you see a lot of regionalism in Tamil Nadu because of anti-Aryan. So anti-Brahmin became anti-Aryan, anti-Aryan became anti-North India, anti-Hindu. So that's how things got extended. So some kind of self-pride, localism, and his reformist orientation was not confined to caste. His reformist orientation was also about treatment of women's education. So Tamil Nadu parties followed Periyar's ideology, played a major role in political process. He was a Congress leader at one time, later started his own party. At a very early age, he started his own party. Then DMK, AADMK, and even now, it was all organizations that came from Periyar's party. Splits and multiple splits. That's why even now, Hindutva ideology may be difficult to spread, may be difficult to percolate in Tamil Nadu. Okay, because Periyar stood for anti-Hindutva ideology. So that's about Periyar. Any questions? After that, we'll go to Phule's analysis of British India. That's about religion and caste.
Sir, all these three persons are the perspectives on religion and caste linking.
Yes, religion and caste links. Yes. Different perspective. In fact, in sociology, they asked what is saint's approach to reform. And some people thought this is Hindutva agenda. That actually is the one that is encouraging Hindutva. Because so-called secularism is so shallow, rootless. If you're secular means you should be atheistic, Marxist, that. You shouldn't have respect for religion, things like that. So somebody so education denied respect for so many things, and somebody else is bringing up the respect to all these things. That is what Hindutva is. So these are unique things about Hinduism, extremely rare things. And these are the things that need to be studied extensively. Why were we like this? What is our approach? How did different people look at the caste system? Okay. Whereas what the education did was they look at the highest from the past in terms of modern ideals of equality. Why is Buddha great? Because even in those days he spoke about equality. Absolute nonsense. It was not great because in 6th century there were ideals of equality and liberty. Not like that. He was completely different. What he understood, has yet to be understood by the modern civilization. Is far ahead. So past being judged in terms of modern ideals. So that is creating some kind of reaction. Isn't there anything worth in the past? Isn't there anything that we need to be proud of or to understand? So violent expression or violent support to that is Hindutva. We were great, and when did we lose that greatness? Muslims. So that's how things are merging. But all these links are not necessary. We need to look at things. Modern education is not the last word on life. It has its own limitations. So we need to look at things critically. What does science say and what science cannot say, what science will not say. And what is science? So we need a holistic education to tackle communalism. And that education includes study of religion, not Hinduism, study of all religions. Okay. So without tackling the issue of religion, we can't really go to the deeper levels of society, because at a deeper level of any society, there is a religion, there is religious belief of right and wrong, who we are, how we came about, what are our sources of pride. This is truly sacred component, identity component. So we need to learn more about our identity component. Then only we will be less dogmatic and more tolerant, more compassionate. We can't brush off all the most important aspects of our existence and read other things with so much detail. So education should not be like this. It should give enough importance to religious concepts. Okay. Now, Phule and British rule. Tell me, what did you understand from that? First of all, what is Phule's attitude towards the British rule? Positive or negative
attitude.
or neutral?
Positive.
Huh? Positive attitude. But does it mean he is not aware of British exploitation?
He was aware, but any sense of change will only be possible with British faith.
So it is not that he is a blind supporter of the British rule. You know, he was talking about drain of wealth, how some people are getting paid so much and farmers are suffering, taxation, all those things. So he's talking about economic exploitation. He's talking about the suffering of the farmers and what the government should have done. But then he took the British government as source of change. And then between the British and the Brahmins, he found the Brahmins as the main enemy. So not that Phule did not know the economic nature of the British regime, not like that. It's just that he was more sensitive to the evils of Indian society. But if you apply Hindutva agenda to Phule now, what would he be called? Any support to British rule? Any good words about British rule?
Anti-national.
Anti-national. Ambedkar would be anti-national. Phule would be anti-national. It is just that people don't have the courage to call Ambedkar anti-national. But otherwise, theoretically, he should be anti-national. Anybody who is saying that the villain is Indian society and not the British is anti-national. So why? It is not that these people did not know the nature of British rule, that it was exploitative, but it was that Indian society has problems and there is caste domination, and so that has to be changed. And also it is in the nature of things, if some people are fighting for bigger thing and for the whole, you will be focusing on your group. That is the nature. In a family, if for example, if mother is ultra security oriented and father is more carefree, suppose mother is not there for some time, what will happen to father? Will he be carefree or he will be more security oriented? He will be more security oriented. He will be more cautious. Isn't it so? So when some people are fighting against the British, then there will be others. Okay, we'll take care of this. So Jinnah need not have to think about India because there are enough number of people to think about India. Let Jinnah think about Muslims. What he thought of Muslims is a different issue. So let Ambedkar think about lower caste. Ambedkar refused to take part in freedom struggle. Even in his student days, people thought he was in London, then he should be like a freedom fighter. Ambedkar refused. Ambedkar was very clear about his priorities. But that does not mean he was anti-national, pro-British, blind to British, or against independence. It's just that his priorities were different and his priorities were right. So this is about critique of Indian society. But now any critiquing of Indian society becomes anti-national. That is wrong. Because this raises the question of what is a nation and what kind of a nation you want to create. This is how either Phule or Ambedkar would ask. It is true you want to create an independent nation, but we are interested in finding out what kind of nation you are interested in creating. Is it that British rule will be replaced by a Brahminical rule? Or Jinnah's question is, will British rule be replaced by Hindu rule? Why are we interested in? If you are against domination, then settle this. How are you going to avoid Hindu domination over Muslims? What is your answer? How are you going to avoid upper caste domination over lower caste? What is your answer? Don't say, we will first check out the British, because Britishers were not there for so many centuries when the upper caste were dominating the lower caste. So how can we not pay attention to the caste? Jinnah's question would be, not that the Hindus were dominating Muslims before the British, not like that. Muslims were rulers. But what would happen in a democracy where Hindus would be a majority? That was Jinnah's question. Valid question. It's not that the Muslims were historically oppressed by Hindus like lower castes were oppressed by upper castes. Ambedkar question is, this was happening all through. What is going to be after independence? Jinnah's question is, in a democracy, Hindus would be in a majority. How would you prevent domination? That was Jinnah's question. But whoever asked these questions were called anti-national. But Ambedkar succeeded in India. Nobody can call him anti-national. But Jinnah, no hope because he was successful in creating Pakistan. So he became anti-national in the context of India, but founder of a different state, Pakistan. But the questions were valid because
Sir,
just one second, those questions raise the issue that what is the nature of India you are going to create? So these are kinds of dissidents. Ambedkar, Periyar, Jinnah, they are friends, not only ideologically, but personally. Because all believe majority is Hindu upper caste. They are imposing on us a particular idea of India. We should not fall prey. All three are convinced. Periyar saw Aryan as well as Brahmin. Ambedkar saw upper caste. Jinnah saw Hindu. So basically, the plot, the main story was rejected by these three people. And they became heroes in their own ways. Because they didn't buy the story. They saw the game. Periyar is a hero. Ambedkar is a hero. Jinnah is a hero. But Periyar is not a hero in North India. Jinnah is not a hero in India. And Ambedkar is not a hero in upper caste, but they accept. So that's how history would judge a person, thinker differently. So when the truth is on their side, one day they will be recognized. Because those people are not going to rule forever. In fact, Gandhi knew Ambedkar had a lot of future. Gandhi had insight. Because they believed in the truth. They knew that these people are giving a story. We shouldn't believe. And all three were right. And that is why this word anti-national is very, very important. I can tell you anybody who is speaking about saying this is unity, united India, united Andhra Pradesh, united Hinduism, all unity agendas are given by those who are dominating the unit. If a system is working to their advantage, they surely want to preserve it. And those people to whom the system is not working to their advantage will say, please. Telangana, Andhra Pradesh was my favorite example. Andhra Pradesh people talked about Telugu pride, Telugu Swan. Telangana people said, please leave us. Okay. But because it was within India and it was about states, it was taken less seriously. But similar is the demand of Muslims. Please, we will separate. Andhra Pradesh people promised all kinds of things. We will treat equally, but they had enough. Same thing about Hindus' promise of secularism.
Sir?
Just one second. So the people who dominate will make all kinds of promises. That is another thing. And the people who are discriminated have to be careful. Because promising is in the interest of the people who are dominating. And they give all kinds of ideals to them: unity and integrity, socialism, secularism, all kinds of ideals. But what matters is not the ideal, not what they profess. What matters is how it is going to be delivered. What kind of political arrangement would be needed in which a group would have better, group purpose would be better served, not the promise. Just one second. So these are not anti-national. They are asking, what is the nation you want to create? How you want to create? And these are our ideals. Okay, Gayatri, now.
Sir, if I ask this question, I might be explaining what's I'm doing. Right? Sir, you said that like it is a fact that Muslims and Muslims were demanding a separate nation. It is in their interest. So what should the Hindus who have accepted partition and they knew that even Muslims will be part of India, they have their reasons to fear also.
No, it is not.
That is what.
No, what is your question? Hindus who have accepted partition is a good idea.
No, sir. No, the point is Muslims have demanded a country and it is given. So when India wants to be secular, these fanatic Hindus, they will see that it is threat to their interest. They are also operating from the fear of like in secular.
Oh, these people are in the majority. How can they have fear? Hindus in
And
Pakistan can have fear. Muslims in India can have fear. How can Hindus in India can have fear?
Sir, this I don't know. I'm just speaking from shallow understanding. I want clarity.
No, not shallow. It's just we're going to examine it.
Sir, they think that all this Muslim appeasement politics, all that they'll see as a threat, and that is how they are mobilized also.
We will look into that. But just say about unity versus majority minority. We'll look into that, communalism and these issues. Okay. So they are only pursuing certain values and they cannot be called anti-national. That is my point. That's all. We'll look into the specifics. So Phule was not wrong. Ambedkar was not wrong. Periyar was not wrong. Jinnah also. Okay. But if somebody is interested in unity, what kind of a thing he should create? That's his responsibility. Because it is a majority who has a stake in creating a better system. Minority doesn't have the power. Minority should trust majority because the power is with the majority. In retrospect, I don't think that what we promised is wrong. What we promised is good. Is good, but it is about how we deliver. It's not about theoretical disagreement. It's about how we deliver. I don't think. And those who wanted something else knew that this is how it would be delivered, so they wanted something else. It is not that they were debating the promise itself. It was not like that. Anyway, we're going to discuss Hinduism, Hindu-Muslim dimension, communalism separately. Okay. But in this case, we're just looking at Brahminism and British rule. Phule thought Brahminism is more villain than British rule. At the same time, knowing fully how the British rule was exploited or drain of wealth, we can see in writings. Next, more specifically, tell me what are the things that he said about agriculture. And And did you get the taste of his writing going through those paragraphs? The way he described a situation of how a peasant went into a Brahmin's house and the scenery. Phule is a great writer.
But
Writing
sir,
seemed to be a bit.
Ambedkar can't write like that. Ambedkar only expresses ideas, but
But-
Phule creates a scene.
but sir, Phule
You watch a movie. Huh?
Yes, sir. The scene is very clear,
Phule
like
sounds-
vegetables.
Scene is that's why I just actually previously it was a lecture, but I thought no, it should be scene only.
With the pillows and the attitude, everything I could have.
Like Tolstoy writing. I just took up one sample, but his writing was like that. It was called stream of consciousness writing. Just write what all you feel, like that. Phule was a great writer. So he thought the Brahmins were misleading the British. And then look at the kind of modern ideas he mentioned. Reservations, did he mention or not? Proportionate reservation. Whatever the population that the Brahmins had, jobs only to that proportionate. And after that, other castes. And then about environmental angle, all water harvesting structures, tank, check dams, bunding, trees, manure. And then he understood these animals are needed for environmental reasons. And he said if they want to kill, they can kill, but by importing. They're killing without any rituals, which means they're killing carelessly, and that is why it is an agricultural crisis. And biotechnology, education of farmers. Okay. And then at one place he says that police should protect, and if the protection failed, that they should pay from their own salaries. Did I include that point? Which is a part of that Right to Information Act. If an officer doesn't do his duty, there should be a fine, and the fine should be from his own salary. And that was what Phule recommended long ago. And then he talks about army. He says that the army is meant to protect the farmers. He didn't say the army was to protect from an enemy somewhere near the border. That's how he looked at the security operators of the state. Finally, it is for the farmers. It's about a theory of the nature of state. Very advanced ideas, water harvesting, environmentalism, caste angle, education angle. Of course, he didn't know the entire economy would change and industrialization, service sector. He didn't think like that. He was thinking at the level of agriculture only. Okay. Anything else? He basically got educated in a Christian missionary school, but before that, before British rule, such an education also would be very, very difficult. In fact, Phule's father feared that they would be thrashed, but one Christian explained, those days are gone. This is not Peshwa rule. This is British rule. Nothing will happen to you. You send your child to the school. And Phule was sent. Okay. So Phule could get education because of the British rule. Before him, some lower caste person who wanted to get educated was thrashed. Ambedkar also could get education because of the British rule. So only Narayan Guru's approach is different. It is a traditional approach to caste, religious approach to caste inequalities. We can say that is also Buddhist approach. Philosophically, there is no justification for caste system. Philosophically, So Narayana Guru's approach is religious approach, spiritual approach, philosophical approach. Okay. So philosophically, there is no justification. If you believe in Advaita, then there shouldn't be a caste system. So moksha undermining caste. Whereas in other cases, modernization undermining caste. So moksha undermining caste is a traditional undermining of the caste. People undermine it through Advaita, people undermine it through Bhakti, Tukaram, Kabir, Nanak, Chaitanya. There were so many saints who undermined the caste through philosophical approach, through spiritual approach. So Narayana Guru's approach is a traditional approach to caste inequality. Ambedkar's approach, Phule's approach, and Periyar's approach is a modern approach. So these are all approaches, which means that within Hinduism, you have a solution. Of course, it can't be a solution, but at least you have a perspective to undermine caste. So it is not true that the entire Hinduism, without any doubt, supports the caste system. It is not like that. So the importance of this is that some people would take a different stand on caste system and Hinduism, and they would say Hinduism has nothing to do with caste system. That is exactly what Gandhi did later. And of course, Gandhi knew Narayana Guru. So Narayana Guru, you can say, he typifies Gandhian approach. But Gandhi is political, logical, but this man is spiritual. Okay. So Gandhi would hold Narayana Guru some kind of an ideal. Okay. Because no support to conversion and glorification of Hinduism, and saying caste is not Hinduism, and showing that a new god or an old god with a different spirit is possible. And Advaita also means all are equal because all are aspects of God, which means there is no justification for caste system. So you can say Gandhian approach, in Gandhian approach, you can take Narayana Guru as an example. Narayana Guru is an example. So Gandhi has somebody like him as an ideal, either consciously or non-consciously. Okay, he thinks such a thing is possible. Whereas Ambedkar cannot think of such a thing at all. So Ambedkar's approach is modern approach. So that's all.